One of the things you would want to be sure to do is, whether you like it or not, get very comfortable, it may take a while, with public speaking, for example. I mean, that's an asset that will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a liability if you don't like doing it or are uncomfortable doing it, that also will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a necessary skill.
Public speaking is a great skill to promote your product or service. It is a skill that will persuade an audience, motivate a workforce, and a tool to convince business associates and customers.
Your public speaking ability has a tremendous influence on your work life, on your success in work, on your ability to get ahead, to reach the next level, to get a promotion, to influence people, to take on leadership positions, to even create your own business. All of that is directly linked to your ability to speak effectively, to communicate clearly, to influence, to persuade, to reach people, whether it's one-on-one or one-on-10 in a small meeting or one-on-100, and you're speaking to a company. Everything comes down to your ability to speak clearly and communicate.
What's critical as a presenter and as a persuader, you got to know your audience. So always think, how much knowledge do they have about the subject I'm going to be talking about? What's their attitude about the subject I'm going to be talking about? What's their attitude about me, about my company? So you really want to spend time in advance knowing your audience so that you can hit the right point.
So the first question to ask in an audience analysis is, what does your audience need and want from you? Also, what do they expect? So what do they need, what do they want, and what do they expect? You should first be able to answer those three questions, and if you can't, you should probably do some more research. After you know that information, it's very important to get some basic demographic information on your audience. Age ranges, genders, cultures, if it's relevant to your topic, and it isn't always. Once you have that information, you need to organize the content in your way that will make sense to the audience. And that's very important, because if the audience already has an existing level of knowledge on a topic, you're going to want to skip that and just go into the meat and potatoes instead of briefing them first with information they already know. Again, always analyze your audience before you communicate.
When it comes to professional speaking, it's important to have a structure for your presentation. This structure should never be chunked at the level of words. Meaning, you shouldn't script it out word for word. There's a big difference for writing for the stage and writing for the page. Those that write it out with words are dry, boring, and wooden. Instead, the structure should have a freedom within it. A freedom to express your points of view and your wisdom, and to allow some of the message to come through you by tapping into your passion.
There are certain things that you need to do before you really get to the content. Otherwise, how do you know you've got the right content? So a good place to start is by thinking about what is your objective in giving the presentation. What is the end point that you want to reach? And there can be a number of reasons for giving a presentation, and often there'll be several of them combined. So the first thing you might be wanting to do is to inform, to educate, to give people an update on the situation. So maybe you're managing a project and you want to tell them where you are, or you're introducing a new set of products or presenting to a possible client, and you want to give them some information. The problem a lot of people have is they think that the presentation is about the information, when actually they're seeking to do a lot more. Almost always in a presentation you are looking to influence people in some kind of way. As a result of your presentation, you want them to do something, feel something, or think something different from how they do at the beginning of the presentation. Just imagine if you did a presentation and people were exactly the same at the end as they were at the beginning. There would have been no point in giving the presentation. So almost always you'll be seeking to influence people to do something. You might also be trying to inspire them to take some kind of action or to feel a particular way. So you have those three key I's: the inform, the influence, and the inspire. And it's important that you really understand what it is that you're looking to do. So I think of this as a point B that you are moving the audience to when you give the presentation. The point at which they go out of the door following you talking for 10, 20, 30 or 40 minutes will be different from how they were when they came in. And the more clearly you can say specifically what that is and how they will be different and what they will be talking about and thinking about as they go down the corridor, the more successfully you'll be able to choose the content. Because there's a danger that you may fall in love with the detail and you get too much data and then you start to overwhelm people. So once you know where you're looking to take your audience to, it's much easier to know what to include. There's a real danger that people will get lost in the detail or fall in love with their data. You've got this huge amount of information and there's a tendency to include it all. And if you do that, the audience will often be overwhelmed with the information. Starting by being very clear what it is that you're looking to achieve means that you don't fall into that trap. And you'll be much more successful in choosing the right information and structuring it in the right way that will give you the end result that you're looking to get.
So when you're giving a presentation, it's really, really important to make sure it's organized clearly and concisely. So what I teach people when I'm coaching them is how to use what I call the diamond format. And the diamond format has a beginning where it starts real focused in the beginning, and then in the middle you develop your presentation, and then at the end it comes to a very tight close. So let me give you an example. In the beginning, you're going to want to talk about what is your objective. State it clearly right up front what your objective is and what you're trying to accomplish in the presentation. Also, at the beginning, you want to talk about what's in it for your audience. How are they going to benefit from what it is you're going to be talking about? So that's the beginning, very focused. Then when you get into your middle of your presentation, or the meat of the presentation, that's where you're going to have no more than 3 things. So when I'm teaching the diamond, I tell people, whatever it is you're talking about, try to keep it into 3 buckets in that middle part. Don't go into 7 things or 5 things, have 3 things, and I'll give you an example in a moment. And then at the end, when the presentation comes to a close, you want to summarize the 3 points you just made. You want to have a conclusion, which goes right back to what your original objective is. Your conclusion goes back to your objective. And then finally, you want to have an action step. So here's an example. Let's say, I'll take a silly example. You're giving a presentation on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And let's say you're going to teach a bunch of people how to make the ideal peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Right up front, you're going to welcome them and say, our objective today is for me to teach you how to make the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the world. And then I'm going to talk about the benefits of that. Your family's going to love you more. They're going to live long, happy lives, whatever the benefits are. Then in the middle, the 3 things might be, number 1, we're going to talk about the peanut butter. Number 2, we're going to talk about the jelly. And number 3, we're going to talk about the bread and how to slice it. So that could be the meat of the presentation. And then at the end, I'm going to summarize quickly. So number 1, we talked about the peanut butter. Make sure you have Skippy peanut butter crunchy. Number 2, the jelly. You want Welch's strawberry jelly. And 3, Wonder Bread sliced on the diagonal. So a quick summary, and the conclusion is if you do all these things, you're going to have the ultimate peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then you give them an action step. We'll see you next Tuesday. Everybody come back with their samples and we'll try them. So use the diamond format. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
I think one of the best kept ideas about good speaking is the power of practice. You see, we often watch a good speaker and he or she makes it look easy. And because we think it's easy, we think we don't need to practice, that it will come to us naturally. The best speakers, in my opinion, are the most prepared speakers. They've really thought through what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. And they've practiced it over and over and over again until it looks natural. And that's the key. Practice shouldn't look like it's stiff and formal. It should look like it's natural because you've integrated the ideas and you've integrated your message in such a way that you can focus on the audience when you share it. So one of the best kept ideas that you can use to be an effective public speaker is to practice, practice, and practice some more.
They say it takes about 7 seconds to make a first impression, and that doesn't mean to say that if you do things wrong, if you kind of mess things up, you can't get it back. But what it does give us is a very clear window of opportunity to get our audience engaged, on side, and listening to what we have to say. So the kind of most important thing to think about really is not to be boring. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, don't do what everyone else does. I've sat through so many presentations where I've listened to someone say, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, everybody, or good morning, everybody. My name's Dominic, I'm from Inflow Training, and I'm here today to talk to you about, well, if you're here today to talk to me about, then just talk to me about it. Get on with it, get in there, and tell me the interesting stuff that's going to get my attention. So what I'd recommend you do is this. I'd recommend that you start with a bang.
People will not pay attention to the usual stuff. To gain attention, we need to interrupt that pattern. Begin with a statement that will grab the audience's attention. Newspaper articles begin with a punching headline. News broadcasts begin with a teaser. Your job at the beginning of a talk is to capture attention and convince your audience with their interest to listen.
When you're giving a presentation or communicating, trying to persuade, make sure that you have attention getters or attention grabbers, or what I sometimes call hooks, in your presentation. So things such as asking your audience a question is a great attention grabber, having an analogy, telling a personal story, those are all great attention grabbers. The benefit of them is obviously, number one, they get the audience's attention. Number two, they help the audience understand what it is you're talking about. And number three, it helps the audience remember your message.
The attention getter is a statement, the anecdote, a narrative, a statistic, a quotation, or something humorous perhaps that starts off your speech or presentation. You can use a number of different sources to get this material, but what you want to consider is this. First, a lot of people like to use humor when they get people's attention. That's good, but make sure the humor is 1, tasteful, and 2, relevant to the topic at hand. If it's not tasteful and definitely not connected to the topic, it's best placed somewhere else. If you decide to use another attention getter other than humor, maybe a personal narrative, a story, a quote, any type of information that is very shocking to your audience, make sure you have the proper citation. One of the ways speakers lose credibility is that they give information but don't have a cite for it. Be sure to get people's attention right off the bat.
Remember, all's well that begins well. Don't beat around the bush. Come straight to the point and construct the speech around one big idea.
Professional speakers oftentimes focus on one big idea, and then they tell stories to flesh out that idea. They don't get greedy and try to cover everything they know. They don't try to cover every single fact. They certainly don't turn around and point to a screen with lots and lots of bullet points, because they understand a speech, a presentation is simply not the place to communicate lots and lots and lots of data. A speech or presentation is a great place to get people to focus on 1, maybe 2 or 3 ideas that are really important, and to get people to do one action.
Keep the momentum. Make sure that every new bit of information you provide builds on what came before. Each idea should lead to another until you are able to present the whole idea in full. Overall, the speech should be a mix of anecdotes, stories, insights, humor, facts, and case studies. And the flow is vital, as the audience should be able to recall it like a story.
So if you and I are giving presentations, whether it's in a corporate arena or a paid stage, you and I need to give our voice, our perspective, because we can do that with more emphasis and passion as opposed to just speaking words. Most people don't respond to speaking words. But if you've ever heard that favorite song that you just love, you love the passion that comes with it. You love the words that are infused with that passion. Why? Because the lyrics and the voice and the sound speaks to you. That's why you love that song, or it speaks to something inside you. So when you're creating your stories, we want to hear your perspective. When you're giving content, we want to hear your perspective. So don't be a wannabe or an actor or trying to copy somebody else, but be unique with your voice. It's more likely to resonate, and more people are more likely to tell everybody how good you are.
The speech should not be monotonous. Your voice is your most powerful and important asset while you are on the stage. Understand that how you say your speech is as important as what you say.
You have to have a flexible voice in order to be able to change. Sometimes you need to be able to speak much faster, possibly in a higher pitch, to get people's attention. Sometimes you need to speak with much lower voice. You need to change the speed of it. You need to be able to use emphasis. So in other words, you're using all sorts of techniques to make your voice interesting.
When you speak, your voice is your most important tool. Fortunately, you can learn to use your voice like playing a musical instrument to increase your power and persuasiveness in any conversation or speech that you give.
You have 5 key sound elements to play with to make your audience like you, believe you, remember you, and hopefully invest in you. You have pitch, pace, tone, melody, and volume. I'll talk briefly about 3 of these building blocks right now. The first is pitch. Is your voice generally high, staying on the top part of your range most of the time? If so, though you might think it's pretty or gentle or non-threatening or calming, unfortunately, it's sending a message to your listeners that you're potentially weak and powerless. And that's not the way you want to come across. If you sound high-pitched, like I'm demonstrating right now, you need to mix it up. Make sure that you go down lower in the range sometimes. Hit some of those bassy, stronger, lower notes in chest. Add them in any place in your sentences, and you'll see and feel how people suddenly react differently to you. They take you more seriously, and that'll really boost your self-confidence and power. Sometimes high, sometimes low. The second building block is melody. When you listen to someone speak, they sound as if they're a piano only with one note, staying on this one note all the time, word after word. This is called monotone, and it bores the heck out of everyone that hears you. It's boring me now. No matter how great your ideas are, still boring. You might say to yourself, that's not me. Roger, I don't speak in a monotone, but I bet each and every one of you do this a lot more than you think. You might start out strong, have a couple of notes in the sentence, and then all of a sudden get to the end of the sentence and then go down. You might have a couple of notes where you stay on one note for a while, and then when you want to make a particular point, you go to another note. So you're like talking like this and saying, well, I don't want to be boring, and then you go right back down to the note that you feel safe. The problem with being monotone, or almost monotone, talking in mostly one note and then just going to another note here and there, is that when people think they know what you're going to sound like next, they think they know what you're going to say next. And when that happens, they just tune you out and stop listening to you. A monotone voice is the fastest way to lose the attention of the audience. They think you know what you're going to sound like next. They think they know what you're going to say next, and they tune you out. It tells your listeners that you don't have enough personality to be surprising, charismatic, or engaging. So here's a very simple way to make melody your absolute new best friend. I call it stair-step melody. You basically have 3 directions you can go. Right now I'm walking up the stairs, going from low to higher notes. Right now I'm walking down the stairs, going from high notes to lower notes. Or I'm just standing on the landing, minding my own business, staying on the same note. When you speak, I'd like you to be walking up the stairs more, walking down the stairs less, and spending a lot less time on the landing on one note. Melodies that go from low to high, they're called ascending melodies. And those sounds make people feel happier. I really like golf. I love you so much. Low to high. But melodies that go from high to low are called descending, and they make people feel sad. I really like golf. I love you so much. So stop boring your audiences and making them sad. Use a lot more ascending melodies and stay away from monotone. Now, the third building block that I want to mention today is volume. Many of you have one volume that you use all the time and you think that's enough. You think of yourself as a strong personality, so you're on the loud side a lot of the time, or vice versa. You're more of an introvert and you generally speak on the softer side. So I'm here to explain that neither of these is bad, but when you mix them together, using louder volumes at key moments to talk about closing the deal, and softer volumes at other specific moments when you need to showcase gratitude, humility, kindness, and compassion. There are so many amazing sides to each of your personalities. My job is to help the audience see how multidimensional you are, how full of life you are. Mix it up. Get louder and softer as you move from word to word, sentence to sentence. Create dynamics, just like the songs you love to listen to. Sometimes they're soft and romantic, and sometimes they're louder and full of energy. Your voice can be music to their ears. They may not remember the words, but they will remember how you made them feel.
So what else comes into play in terms of your speaking? Well, articulation. You have to open your mouth. And one of the things I'm always dealing with is people who speak with their mouths closed. So if you're meeting somebody and they talk to you like this, first of all, it doesn't feel very friendly. So in terms of your body language, it's pretty grim. And secondly, you can't understand, let alone hear, what they are saying. So it's terribly important that you get used to actually opening your mouth to form the words that hopefully, once you've done the breathing, once you're in contact with your resonance and your projection, you are now able to do. But you have to form the words with the lips, the tongue, the roof of the mouth, and the teeth. So there are varying exercises that you can do around that. One very good tip to remember in terms of whether or not your mouth is open is what I call the 2 fingers rule, which is the first and second finger in between your teeth. And that is the position your mouth should be in when you are speaking, not that. And that is a very good thing to try and remember. You can try it yourself in front of the mirror and see what your mouth actually looks like when it's actually open at the correct level for speaking.
Articulation is pretty easy. Your mouth works a little bit harder, and you're going to have to listen for the clear sound of syllables that are distinctive. An easy way to practice this with just a few seconds a day is to say out loud, I am articulating every single syllable. Say that with me. I am articulating every single syllable. I promise if you do that once or twice a day, it's going to help tune your ear and get your mouth working, and you'll start to notice what it feels like to articulate every single syllable.
So let's talk about body language when it comes to giving a presentation. In the 1960s, a guy by the name of Albert Mahabrian, who was a professor at UCLA, he did a study and he tried to understand when people are communicating with each other or presenting to each other, how much of the meaning of the message comes from anything that you see or the visuals, How much of the meaning of the message comes from the vocal, which is the sound of the voice, like volume and inflection, and how much of the meaning of the message comes from the actual words or the content. And what he discovered was, based on the study he did, 55% of the meaning of the message comes from what people see. 38 comes from the sound of the person's voice, the volume and the inflection, and 7%, only 7% comes from the actual words. Now, I'm not saying, nor is he saying, that words are not important. I think the words in your message are clearly important. But what that study told a lot of people is that how we present our ideas and how we present our message through nonverbals and body language is very, very important. A couple things I'll touch upon. Hands. I'll talk about hands and stance. When you're using your hands, a lot of times people feel, or they've been taught in grade school, that they shouldn't use their hands when they're presenting. Not at all. You should definitely be using your hands and use them as you naturally would when you're gesturing and talking to people. So if you're giving a presentation on having the team work together, use your hands to display that. If you're talking about, hey, we had very high profits, then use your hands to display that. If you're saying that we want to cover the whole country, use your hands to display that. So the hands can help describe your ideas very well. When it comes to the stance, there's 3 choices you have with your stance. 2 of them are good. One choice is this: don't move around. In your stance, just get planted. That's a good choice. The other choice, the second choice, is a good one, and that is when you move on purpose. So if you're going over to the flip chart, or you might be using PowerPoint or grabbing a prop, that's good purposeful movement. The last choice with stance is not a good choice, and that is when you're in one area but you're just repeatedly moving back and forth or rocking side by side. That can be really, really annoying. So keep in mind, with your hands, use them naturally, and with your stance, either get planted or move on purpose.
You see, too many times I see speakers who have choreographed their body movements and their body gestures, and sometimes it seems almost natural, but usually it doesn't seem natural at all. Don't do gestures. People say I have the best gestures. I don't have gestures. I'm just very enthusiastic, and my emotion and energy comes out through my body, and that's what you should do. You should get the energy and emotion from the story that you're telling, or from the passion that you have to getting it across to the audience. That's what's important.
Be energetic. The whole attention of the audience is on the speaker. If the speaker is energetic and alive, the audience will be the same. The energy of the speaker infectiously rubs on to the delegates in the meeting hall.
So after 15 years of coaching people on their presentations and their persuasion skills, people will say to me, so what's the most important thing? Now, I used to think, well, there isn't one most important thing. A lot of things are important. But now, after all these years, I can tell you the one most important thing that people should keep in mind is their level of energy. Now, energy is an abstract concept. So let me tell you what energy means. Energy means things such as the volume of your voice, the inflection that you're using, your eye contact, your gestures, your expressions. So all those things combined, that all adds up to energy. So as I've coached people and I look back on them, the thousands of people I've worked with, I would say that 80% of the people that I've had to coach have low energy. They're just not getting the job done, and I'm always encouraging them, having more energy, more energy. Maybe 15% of the time I find people whose energy level is in the right place, and then maybe 5% of the time, it's not much. If it's that much, I'd be surprised. 3% I'm telling people, okay, pull back your energy a little bit. So my point is this: most of the time I'm telling people to speak up louder, have more energy. So it's really important that when you're going to work on your energy, you want to practice with a partner. Go into a conference room, get a partner in there, have them observe you, and practice. And they can tell you if they feel like your energy level is the right level. The other thing is, now with smartphones, very easy to set up your smartphone, videotape yourself, and you judge if you have the right degree of energy. Because energy is contagious, and if you're at the right level, then your audience will be engaged.
Be a storyteller. Facts tell, but stories sell. Storytelling is a great tool to get into your topic. Use anecdotes and personal experiences to build your story.
At a high level, the most important thing to me is thinking, how do you want the audience to feel? Not how do you want the audience to think. Most people that you watch present are trying to hit your mind. They put facts and figures on a piece of paper. Oftentimes you're reading them, you're not even listening. There is no connection. Challenge yourself to make people feel something. No one's ever changed their behavior because of a fact. They change it because they feel something. Stories make people feel something. Stories are memorable. Facts and figures are not. Now, stories have a natural flow. This happened, so that happened, so that happened. You listen because you want to know the end of the story. So before I give a talk, I know exactly how I'm going to start. I know exactly how I'm going to finish. In the middle, I usually have 3 stories. In this story, this happened, so that happened, so that happened. Close.
When speaking, your objective should be to give the audience a gift of something that you have learned. If you conceptualize your talk that way, you can come closer to being as relaxed and you can communicate your messages passionately.
One of the ways to engage your audience is to tell stories. So your personal stories are what are going to move people. And the tough part about telling a personal story is most great stories have some sort of conflict in it or some sort of a hardship that had to be overcome. So part of telling a great story is that you have to be able to be willing to be transparent and forthcoming about some of the hardships you've overcome. In this economy, people want a hero. They want to be led by a hero, and they want someone who can prove to them that they've overcome hardships in the past and that you're qualified to lead them through this one. So be vulnerable and open and tell those stories, and it'll engage your audience and it will move them to the next place and destination that you need to take your audience.
But make sure your stories are not dragging or boring. The attention span of listeners is short. If there is nothing interesting to tell, then don't talk at all. Always keep your style conversational. Let it not sound monologue, but be more like a dialogue to get your audience involved. Make it emotional. The speech must make the audience go through a variety of emotions, from being surprised, funny, persuasive, motivated, and energetic.
The best way to bring emotion to any speech is to visualize what you're going to speak about. For example, today is a beautiful day. Now visualize that. Think about the sunshine, the trees, spring is in the air. So today is a great day. The sun is shining, the trees are blooming. Think about the picture first, then open your mouth.
The drama and power of a speech is contained in the silences that you create as you move from point to point.
The biggest mistake most speakers make is a failure to slow down or use pauses.
Now, there's nothing as attention-grabbing as a pause. When you pause, you bring people up short. They mentally trip and fall into the silence that you have created. They immediately give you back their full attention. Each time you pause, go silent, smile, you get them to recenter themselves on you and what you are saying. For instance, the dramatic pause is used to make a particular point stick in the minds of your audience. You can use a dramatic pause immediately before delivering an important point, and you can use a dramatic pause immediately afterwards to allow people to absorb the importance of what you just said. For example, I would say there are 3 keys to your doubling your income in the next 6 months. If you practice these keys, nothing can stop you from earning more money than you've ever earned before. Key number 1 is this, and you start, and at the end you stop. Key number 2 is this, and then you start and describe it, and then you stop. And at the end you just stop and allow people to absorb. Another pause you can use is called the sentence completion pause. This should be illegal because it's so powerful. And this is where you make a statement or quote a line that everyone has heard before and knows the words. When you give the first half of the line, or even 9/10 of the line, the audience mentally leans forward to complete the sentence with you. This causes them to engage more closely with you and to listen with greater attentiveness to what you're saying. Now, whenever you use this technique, you must discipline yourself to stop and wait until the audience speaks up and completes the sentence. You then repeat the words to finish the thought. You'll have the total attention of the audience. Here's an example of what I do. I'm talking about selling and running a business in competitive times. And I say, but you're not afraid of that, because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Everybody in the audience completes the sentence. They lean forward and they go, going. They're always saying it. They don't necessarily speak aloud, but they finish the sentence in your mind, their mind. So it's a very powerful technique you can use.
Silence and space between chords allows for emphasis and lets your audience catch up with your ideas. Connect with your audience. Make good eye contact by moving them across the room and lock the eyes with as many people as you can.
Eye contact is critical when giving a presentation. When people can look you in the eye and you can look them in the eye, your believability goes up. I find that eye contact and speed of speech go hand in hand. People who tend to speak too quickly also tend not to have very good eye contact. People who speak at a comfortable pace have really good eye contact. So a way to remember what's the right amount of eye contact is this. I tell people, use the stop and shop technique. Stop and shop is this. When you're giving a presentation, you want to stop with people, look at them, and spend a little time with them, and then you're going to shop around and look at the whole group. So you want to make sure you're stopping at individuals as you're giving your presentation, but then always shopping around. So stop and shop around. That will get you good eye contact.
I often have people come up to me and say, "I felt like you were speaking right to me." The way I do that is I start a point and I'm looking at a point, and when I finish, then I move and I start again. If you have any kind of audience, I actually do that in conference rooms. If I'm speaking to somebody, I speak until I pause, move, and start again. It's very different than doing this. If you do that, people do not engage back. If you talk to somebody until you're done and then move, you get a very different impression.
Audience participation. Keeping audience interaction makes the speech more alive and participative. You could ask the audience if they agree with your points, or ask them to raise hands if they can connect with your idea or experience.
Here's number one. You got to start by knowing that it is time for you to show up authentic. That means you got to let us see who you really are. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable. It means you got to alter your privacy settings. There's a lot of people that only want to talk about the safe stuff and maybe other people's problems, when in reality, it's time to get real. And being real means vulnerable and honest. So when I say adjust your personal privacy settings, what I mean is there's a lot of things that you would never tell people that are actually good to tell them if you're a leader. And if you want to engage your audience, if you want them to be vulnerable, then you get to lead by what? You get to lead by example. So in the next 4 things I'm going to ask you to do, just remember, be vulnerable. And that can sometimes mean telling the hard stuff that you never thought would come out of your mouth because you want to keep it hidden. You don't want people to know about your hard moments in life and your sad moments and the parts that were hard or the things that you were scared of. But that's exactly what you do to engage an audience in the most real way. Number 1 is be authentic. Number 2, start off every presentation with 3 enrolling questions. These are 3 positive questions where the answer is yes. So an example of an enrolling question, a generic one would be, who's excited to be here today? And then I might say, by show of hands, how many of you are excited to be here today? That's my first enrolling question. If I'm going to be talking about the art of speaking and how to engage your audience, because we kind of are today, then I might say, and how many of you would be excited if today I could share with you the 5 ways to engage your audience in the best way possible? Can I hear some noise on that? And now all of a sudden I've invited them to go ahead and step up their game and now go from a safe hand position to get verbal with me. Both of them are positive answers. And then it's time to bring out enrolling question number 3. It needs to be a crescendo. It needs to be your biggest and brightest yet. And so it might be something like, and how many of you get on your feet and how many of you are ready to learn those 5 things right now? Now all of a sudden, I've got my 3 questions out there. I had them raise their hand. They got verbal. And now I'm standing and I'm getting a round of ovation. And guess what? I just took the stage for like 20 seconds. So you got to come out. You want to engage your audience. Step number 2, ask 3 engaging questions that will enroll them in saying, all right, I'm excited to learn from you. So you'll sit down and plan what those are. Here's the 3rd thing that you want to do. Introduce who you are. My name is Chris Crone, and I'm an expert stage facilitator, and today I'm going to share with you XYZ. So you need to share them who you are And you also get to establish your credibility of what you're an expert in. That's number 3 in engaging your audience so that they can start relating to you. Number 4, the real relatability comes in the 4th step where you're going to share a story. And I want you to start off vulnerable. I want you to share a story of what hasn't been working in your life. I want you to share with them a moment when you were down and out. I want you to share a moment when life just stinked. Stinked? Stunked. All right, so what is that story? And I'm looking for 2 minutes max, not very long. And I don't want you to tell them what happened when you came out of it. I just want you to relate with them and let them know, I get it, crap happens, it hits the fan. Life didn't work out so well for me. Here are the things that didn't measure up and didn't work for me. That's number 4. When you're done telling the story, though, you're going to swing into number 5. This is all happening in the first 5 minutes of engagement, where you get to step forth with your promise, which gets to be, and because of that story, I stand before you today, and I am going to teach and share with you the 5 ways to engage your audience in the most powerful way possible. Those are the 5 things that I do every single time I get in front of an audience. Let's review. And number 1, be authentic. Meaning be real and let them see who you really are. Number 2, ask 3 enrolling questions. Get them excited. Number 3, introduce who you are and what you're an expert of. Number 4, share a story of what wasn't working. And then number 5, give them a promise. I'm going to demonstrate these all really quick in a condensed format in regards to something I talk about a lot on our Limitless TV channel, which is real estate investing. So I just got invited to the stage, and I might start off with, how many of you are excited to learn about real estate? Can I see a raise of hands? Excellent. And let me just know, how many of you know someone that has made a lot of money in real estate? Can I hear some noise on that one? And final question, how many of you would love to learn today a simple 3-step system for learning how to make money in real estate? Let's hear it. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Chris Crone, and I'm an expert real estate investor. I've been investing for the last 10 years, and I've done nearly $1 billion worth of real estate. How many of you would like to learn from someone that has that level of track record? How many of you want to learn from some of my own pitfalls, some of my own trials, and some of my errors? And how many of you would like to learn what I'm doing today that is working better than anything I've ever done before? Aw, yeah. Okay, well, friends, before I get started, I just want to take a moment and share with you what life was like in real estate before there was real estate. You know, when my wife and we first got married, we had really big dreams. We had life all planned. I was going to be a doctor, going to school, and ultimately I was going to be a successful surgeon. And when I took my first chemistry class, I quickly found out that I did not have the aptitude, or at least it didn't come natural to me. And I don't know if any of you feel like you've ever worked really hard in a class before and didn't get what you wanted, but how many of you have ever felt disappointed when you kind of stunk it up? Well, I decided to retake the class. And on the second go around, I didn't get a C like before. I got a C minus. I remember talking to my advisor that told me to give up that dream and how hard that was. So I came home that day and I told my wife. And I was surprised that she wasn't as heartbroken over it as I was, but she was heartbroken over something different. We didn't have the money to pay the bills. We didn't have the money to pay for food in the cabinets. We didn't have the ability to cover tuition. And in that moment, I knew that I needed to do something. Something needed to change, or else I might financially struggle for the rest of my life. I wasn't going to be a doctor, and maybe I wouldn't be able to become my next dream or the dream after. But I committed that day that I would do something so I wouldn't have to face that personal pain of financially letting my family down. And friends, that's why I'm here with you today. And this is the promise I have. If you sit tight, get teachable, get open-minded, in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to share with you what I learned in real estate and how I retired just 4.5 years later after doing it. And I'm going to share with you the top 5 things you need to do to make real estate the most successful endeavor. By show of hands and by noise, can I hear how many of you are excited to learn about that today? All right. I heard you through there, okay? I just want you to know I felt your excitement. Okay. That was maybe 3 minutes. And what I did is I asked my 3 enrolling questions. I introduced myself as the expert. And then I had a chance to share with them a vulnerable story that is true from my past and to share a promise of what we're going to be going over. Friends, these are the 5 steps of how to engage your audience and light them up out the gate. Practice these steps and then rock it.
If the speech is longer than 45 minutes, incorporating some fun activities will keep the audience awake and attentive. Make actionable points. The purpose of a speech is to help the audience to decide or to take action on some great ideas. Speech should not only be about providing information or knowledge, but also about applying that knowledge.
Have you ever sat in a workshop where the presenter wraps up the presentation and then moves into the question and answer period, then finishes with, "Thank you very much for being here. That's all we have time for today." Aside from being a totally lame and ineffective close, the speaker hasn't given any instruction to the audience on what they're supposed to do with the information. Information in and of itself doesn't really have any meaning, but it's what people do with the information that can make a difference and add value to their lives. To be a credible and dynamic presenter, you must know what you want your audience to do with the information that you are giving them, and then get them to do it.
Convey and emphasize on the message clearly. A strong message can be repetitive in different ways till it creates an impact on the audience.
When you're speaking in public, it's an opportunity to influence. What you're really doing is you're creating change. Great public speakers facilitate change in the world, whether they know it or not, because you're changing people's beliefs, therefore you're changing the way they think. When you change the way they think, you might change the way they feel. If you change the way they feel, you might change the decisions that they make on a daily basis. If you change that, you'll then change their actions, which will then change the results that they're producing. So always remember, as a public speaker, it's not about just imparting information, because people will potentially act upon that information. So really what it's about is influence and change.
Stick to your time. Some speakers will go on until they bore the audience to death. You should stop talking before your audience stops listening. Most of the presentations or speeches take more time than expected. If you have an hour for presentation, be ready with content for 50 minutes. Also, allot 5 minutes for questions and answering at the end.
Good job. You're done with the content portion of your presentation. Now it's on to Q&A. But handling Q&A can sometimes be a little sticky. So here's some tips to help you deal with it more effectively. First, whenever someone asks you a question, what you should always do is repeat the question back to them. It serves two purposes. The first purpose is it lets the rest of the audience hear the question, whereas if the person speaking was a soft speaker, they might not have. The second thing it does is it gives you time to think and process on what your response might be. So dual purpose technique there. But let's say you have a person who is incessantly asking you questions and taking up a lot of time. You can politely defer them till later by saying, "Thank you, ma'am or sir, I really appreciate your questioning. Let's have a conversation after the presentation one-on-one." That's a great technique. Or let's say you have someone who is, instead of asking you a question, is getting up on a soapbox. It's okay to politely interrupt them and say, "We only have a few minutes for questions. Will you please ask yours?" That's an okay thing to do, and it makes you effective at handling Q&A.
In this speech, on a high note, you begin with a bang, and you also end with a bang. Your closing remarks should be the high point of your speech.
Your final words at the end of your talk can have an extreme impact on your audience. Carefully chosen, your final words can cause your audience to think and feel and act differently than they would have without your influence. Very often, it is your final words which are the message that your audience remembers the longest. So one of the best ways to close your talk is to end with a call to action. A call to action is the best way to wrap up your talk with strength and power. Remember, the whole purpose of professional speaking is to get people to take an action that they would not have taken in the absence of your speaking. So you must be clear, what action do I want these people to take? It's almost like a sales presentation is at the end of your sales presentation, the action that you want the person to take is to buy your product. At the end of a speech, your action that you want them to take is you want them to do what you are suggesting that they do. So for example, a closing statement with a powerful call to action is this, is we have great challenges and great opportunities, and with your help, we will meet them and make this next year the best year in our history. That's a great way for a manager or a director or even the chairman of the board to end a talk about the state of the business. Whatever you say, imagine an exclamation point at the end. As you approach the conclusion of your talk, pick up your energy and tempo. Speak with strength and emphasis. Drive the final point home. Another effective way to close your talk is with a quick summary. As you approach the end of your talk, you can say something like, Let me briefly restate these main points that we just talked about. And then use your fingers. You then list your key points one by one and repeat them to the audience, showing how each of them links in to each of the other points. Audiences enjoy a linear presentation or a repetition of what they have just heard. This makes it clear that you're coming to the end of your talk, and it also reminds them of your key points, so it's easier for them to remember and take action. So you can also close with a story. As you reach the end of your talk, you can say, "Let me tell you a story that illustrates what I've been talking about." People love stories. You then tell a brief story with a moral and tell the audience what the moral is, so it's clear this is the point of the story. Don't leave it to them to figure it out for themselves. Often you can close with a story that illustrates your key points and then clearly links back to the key message that you're making with your speech. Another way to close your talk is to close it with inspiration. If you've given an uplifting talk, remember that hope is and always has been the great religion of mankind. People love to be motivated and inspired to be and do something different and better in the future.
The last 30 seconds of your speech must send people out energized and fulfilled. The last bits must be inspirational to help the audience take some serious action.
Whenever you give a presentation or whenever you're delivering a message, you want to tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Number 1, tell the truth. Number 2, tell that truth with a story. And number 3, tell that story with a picture.
I'm sometimes asked, what's the best speaking advice you've ever been given? Even though I was still in high school at the time, I can remember what the advice was and who gave it. It was a state legislator in Ohio named David Johnson, who told me that whenever I spoke, to always remember that people want to be entertained. Now on the surface you say, but Mark, I'm not an entertaining speaker per se. I have a serious message I'm trying to convey. That may be true, but you're going to convey that message a whole lot better if you package it in an engaging and entertaining presentation style. See, I think what David Johnson was saying is that to engage people, we really need to offer something of high interest, because today people are so preoccupied that getting and keeping their attention is one of the biggest challenges that we have as communicators. So if you want to be a better speaker, no matter what kind of speaker you are, go back to that advice. It's worked for me for many years and I still believe it's true. People always want to be entertained.
Please leave your comments below if you want to add any tips that you follow. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe.